Wi-Fi is one of those things you never think about until it stops working, and then it becomes your router's fault for everything wrong in your life. But this technology didn't just appear fully formed. It went through almost 30 years of format wars, confusing naming schemes and theoretical speeds nobody has ever actually seen in real life. Every generation made a promise. Some kept it, some really didn't. Let's go through all of them. 802.11. The year was 1997, the internet was in its awkward teenage phase and wireless networking was mostly a research lab fantasy. The IEEE ratified the original 802.11 standard that year, and Wi-Fi technically existed, though technically existed is probably the right phrase. It was more like a rough draft. Speeds topped out at 1 to 2 megabits per second on the 2.4 GHz band. A modern HD stream needs around 5 megabits per second, so this couldn't even clear that bar. Hardware was bulky and expensive, hundreds of dollars per device, aimed entirely at businesses and industrial settings. Real-world performance felt like dial-up with a wireless antenna stapled to it. Range was short enough that you often needed to be in the same room as the access point to get a usable signal. There was no real consumer competition because nobody else was attempting this at scale. But that's almost the point. The original 802.11 proved wireless data transmission over radio waves could actually work at a meaningful level. It was a proof of concept more than a product, and that proof would end up changing everything. 802.11b. The year was 1999 and the format war nobody asked for began. The IEEE released two new standards at the same time, 802.11a and 802.11b. On paper, 802.11a was the obvious winner. It ran on 5 GHz and delivered speeds up to 54 megabits per second. 802.11b ran on 2.4 GHz and topped out at 11 megabits per second. And yet 802.11b won the consumer market completely. Think of it like VHS versus Betamax. The higher spec format lost because it was shorter range, significantly more expensive, and harder to build affordable chips for. The 2.4 GHz signal punched through walls better, hardware costs dropped quickly, and when Apple launched the airport base station using 802.11b in 1999, regular people had wireless internet at home for the first time. 11 megabits sounds embarrassing today, but it was fast enough to load early websites and, let's be real, pull music off Napster, which was basically the primary use of the internet in 1999. 802.11b was the generation that made home Wi-Fi a real thing, not the fastest option, the one that actually showed up. 802.11g. By 2003, people had gotten a taste of wireless internet, and 802.11b's 11 megabits per second ceiling was starting to feel cramped. 802.11g fixed that by doing something genuinely smart. It brought 802.11a's 54 megabits per second speed over to the 2.4 GHz band everyone was already using, and it stayed fully backward compatible with 802.11b devices. If you had older hardware, it still connected. No forced upgrades. The catch was that connecting a slower 802.11b device to a 802.11g network dragged the whole thing down. Like one driver doing 40 miles per hour in the fast lane while everyone else waits. Still, 54 megabits per second on the band people already had was a genuine jump. Wireless gaming became a thing. Laptops started shipping with built-in Wi-Fi as standard rather than a pricey add-on. 802.11g didn't reinvent anything. It just quietly ran home networks for most of the 2000s without drama. If you owned a laptop between 2003 and 2009, this was almost certainly what you had inside it, and it probably never gave you much trouble. That is genuinely the highest praise a networking standard can receive. Wi-Fi 4/8 02.11n. By 2009, the 2.4 GHz band was a disaster. Everyone's routers were overlapping, your neighbor's signal was living rent-free inside your walls, and 54 megabits per second wasn't cutting it anymore. 802.11n is a retroactively branded Wi-Fi 4 in and changed the underlying architecture instead of just bumping a number. This was the generation that introduced MIMO, multiple input, multiple output. Instead of one antenna doing all the heavy lifting, 802.11n routers used multiple antennas to send and receive independent data streams simultaneously. Think of it like adding lanes to the highway instead of just raising the speed limit. Theoretical maximums hit 600 megabits per second with 4 spatial streams. Real-world consumer setups typically landed between 150 and 300 megabits per second. The other key move, 802.11n, was the first mainstream standard to support both 2.4 and 5 GHz, so you could escape the crowded 2.4 GHz mess when you needed clean airwaves. Dual-band routers went from premium to normal. Good 802.11n routers landed around $80 to $150 at launch and came down steadily from there. This was the first Wi-Fi generation people actually built their daily routines around, not just casual browsing, but real genuine dependency. Wi-Fi 5/8 02.1 won a C. In 2013, Wi-Fi had a reputation problem, capable enough for everyday use, but not quite reliable enough for the stuff people were starting to care about. 802.11ac, now called Wi-Fi 5, set out to fix that with one bold call: drop 2.4 GHz entirely and go all in on 5 GHz. Wider channels, up to 80 MHz initially, 160 MHz later, pushed theoretical single-stream speeds toward 1.3 gigabits per second. Those numbers looked fantastic on the router box and were loosely theoretical in practice, but actual real-world throughput landed between 200 and 500 megabits per second on a solid connection, which was genuinely impressive. The 2016 Wave 2 update added MU-MIMO, letting the router handle multiple devices at the exact same time instead of serving them in rotation. Old Wi-Fi was like a walkie-talkie, only one device talks at a time and everyone else waits. MU-MIMO turned it into a phone system with multiple active lines running simultaneously. Wave 2 theoretical maximums hit around 3.4 gigabits per second across all streams. This was the era where wireless finally felt competitive with a physical Ethernet cable for everyday tasks, and where pairing Wi-Fi with gigabit home internet stopped feeling like a waste of money. Wi-Fi 6/8 02.1 1AX. In 2019, the problem wasn't raw speed. It was that every device in the house was fighting over the same airwaves at once, and traditional Wi-Fi handled that about as well as one cashier trying to serve a crowd of 50. 802.11ax, marketed as Wi-Fi 6, attacked that directly with OFDMA. It sounds like a pharmaceutical brand, but what it does is let the router subdivide its channel into smaller subchannels and serve multiple devices simultaneously and far more intelligently, less like one cashier and more like opening several checkout lanes at once. In a crowded apartment building or an office full of connected devices, the difference over Wi-Fi 5 is noticeable even when raw speed numbers don't look dramatically different. Theoretical max hits 9.6 gigabits per second across all bands. MU-MIMO expanded to 8 simultaneous streams. A feature called Target Wake Time helped battery-powered devices, phones, smart home gadgets, IoT hardware, sleep more efficiently between connections. Wi-Fi 6 routers started around $150 to $200 on the affordable end. Then in 2021, Wi-Fi 6E extended the standard into the brand new 6 GHz band. Fresh spectrum, almost zero legacy interference, and wider 160 MHz channels with basically no old devices competing for them. If you're still on Wi-Fi 5 and genuinely don't feel the need to upgrade, drop that in the comments, because for a typical home setup, the jump isn't always night and day. Wi-Fi 7/8 02.11be, Wi-Fi 7 was ratified in 2024, and the spec sheet honestly looks like someone just kept adding zeros until the document ran out of room. Theoretical maximum throughput, up to 46 gigabits per second. Maximum channel width on 6 GHz, 320 MHz, which is double Wi-Fi 6E's already wide 160 MHz. Signal modulation jumped from 1024 QAM to 4096 QAM, packing more data into each individual transmission. But the standout feature is multi-link operation, or MLO. Every previous standard made a device pick one band at a time. MLO lets a device bond 2 or even 3 bands simultaneously and use all of them at once, like turning a single-lane road into a multi-lane expressway where every lane is actually moving traffic. Latency drops significantly as a result. For competitive gaming, large local network transfers, or very high-resolution streaming, those gains are real and measurable. The catch is that both your router and your device need Wi-Fi 7 support to unlock any of this. Hardware is still at the premium end. Good Wi-Fi 7 routers are sitting in the $300 to $600 range right now, but these prices always fall. Wireless is chasing wired speeds, and it is getting very, very close. So from 2 megabits per second hardware aimed at boardrooms nobody could afford, to 46 theoretical gigabits running across 3 simultaneous bands in a device that fits in your pocket. Wi-Fi covered a lot of ground. 802.11b made it accessible. Wi-Fi 4 made it dependable. Wi-Fi 5 made it fast enough to actually trust, and Wi-Fi 7 is quietly making that Ethernet cable in your desk drawer feel a little more optional. What generation is your current router? Drop it in the comments. If this one helped things click, hit the like button. It genuinely helps the channel grow. Next up, every Ethernet standard explained the same way, and that one pairs perfectly with this video. Click the video on screen right now.